She was wearing a dress that cost $14,000. Her handbag was worth more than most people's cars. Her ring was so large it looked almost theatrical, and she was sitting in my office sobbing so hard that she could not catch her breath long enough to finish a single sentence. When she finally calmed down enough to speak, she said something that I have heard from more wealthy wives than I could ever count. She said, "I have everything a woman is supposed to want, and I have never been more miserable in my entire life. I live in a house that people drive past and photograph. I wear clothes that other women compliment every time I leave the house. I have staff. I have cars. I have accounts at every store and restaurant in this city, and I would trade all of it tonight for a husband who looks at me when I am talking." She was not exaggerating. I had met her husband the week before. He was sharp, driven, successful, worth somewhere north of 200 million. And in our session together, he spoke about his wife the same way he spoke about the house and the cars and the portfolio. She was part of the structure, part of the operation. He did not describe a woman he loved. He described an asset he maintained. And the worst part was that he had absolutely no idea he was doing it. That was 8 years ago. They are divorced now. She walked away with a significant settlement, and he was genuinely confused about why she left. He kept saying, "But I gave her everything." And I remember thinking to myself, you gave her everything except the only thing she was asking for. You gave her everything except you. I have been working with wealthy families for my entire career. And if there is one pattern that I see more consistently than almost any other, it is this. The wives of wealthy men are among the unhappiest people I have ever encountered. Not all of them. I want to be clear about that. There are wealthy marriages that work beautifully, but they are the exception. The rule is something far more painful. The rule is a woman who lives inside a life that looks like a dream and feels like a sentence. A woman who has been given everything the world says she should want, and who cannot figure out why she still cries in the shower at night when no one can hear her. I want to talk about why this happens. Not to generate sympathy, although I think sympathy is warranted. Not to demonize wealthy men, although some of them deserve to hear hard truths. But to explain a dynamic that I have seen destroy hundreds of women from the inside out, while the world looks at their lives with envy. The first thing people need to understand is what happens to a marriage when one partner controls all of the wealth. And in the vast majority of the cases I see, it is the husband who built the fortune, and the wife who entered a life that was already constructed around his success. She did not build it, she joined it. And that distinction matters enormously, because it creates a power imbalance that infects every aspect of the relationship. When your husband is the source of everything in your life, something shifts in the marriage that is almost impossible to name, but impossible to ignore. You are no longer partners. You are no longer equals. You are a dependent. And I do not mean that in the legal sense, although that is often true as well. I mean it in the emotional sense. Your entire life exists because of his work. The house you live in, the car you drive, the school your children attend, the clothes on your back, the social circle you belong to, all of it flows from him. And that creates a dynamic where gratitude becomes obligation, where comfort becomes a cage, where the simple act of disagreeing with your husband carries an unspoken weight, because somewhere in the back of your mind, you know that everything you have could disappear if this relationship ends. I had a client once who described it perfectly. She said, "I feel like a guest in my own life. Everything around me belongs to him. He earned it, he built it, he chose it. I just live inside of it. And every time we argue, I can feel it in the room. This unspoken thing that says, be careful, because you did not build any of this." She was not being paranoid. Her husband had never threatened her. He had never explicitly held the money over her head. But he did not have to. The architecture of their life did it for him. The money spoke even when he did not, and she heard it every single day. This is the first layer of unhappiness, the loss of equality, the slow erosion of a woman's sense of agency and autonomy inside a marriage where she did not create the wealth and therefore does not feel entitled to it, even though she is legally and morally a full partner. And this loss of equality shows up in ways that most people would never think to look for. It shows up in how she makes decisions. She does not make them. She requests them. She does not say, "I want to renovate the kitchen." She says, Do you think we could renovate the kitchen? She does not say, I enrolled the kids in that program. She says, would you be okay if I enrolled the kids in that program? Every choice runs through him, not because he demands it, but because the money demands it. Because when one person controls the resources, the other person instinctively defers. And over years and decades, that deference hollows out a woman's sense of self until she cannot remember the last time she made a decision without checking with someone first. It shows up in how she handles conflict. She does not fight, she manages. She has learned that expressing anger or frustration or disappointment is dangerous. Not physically dangerous, but structurally dangerous. Because if she pushes too hard, or complains too loudly, or makes him feel criticized, there is a consequence. He withdraws. He becomes cold. He reminds her with a look or a tone or a silence that he has options, and she has a lifestyle that depends on his willingness to continue providing it. And so she swallows it. She smiles through it. She tells herself that she is being ungrateful, that millions of women would kill to have her problems, that she has no right to be unhappy when she lives like this, and she buries her feelings so deep that eventually she cannot access them at all. She becomes numb, and she mistakes that numbness for contentment because it hurts less than the alternative. Now I want to talk about something that I think is one of the most cruel aspects of being a wealthy wife, and that is the social isolation that comes with the role. Because from the outside, it looks like these women have extraordinary social lives. They attend events. They sit on charity boards. They have lunch at exclusive restaurants with other women who live similar lives. Their calendars are full. Their social media is polished. They appear to be thriving. But here is what no one sees. Those friendships are almost never real. They are positional. They exist because of where these women sit in the social hierarchy, not because of who they are as people. And every wealthy wife I have ever worked with knows this on some level, even if she cannot articulate it. She knows that if her husband lost everything tomorrow, or if the divorce went through and she was no longer Mrs. Whoever, most of those women would disappear. Not all at once, not dramatically. They would just slowly stop calling, stop inviting, stop including, because the friendship was never about her. It was about the world she represented. And without that world, she has no value in their eyes. I had a client who went through a divorce from a man worth over $100 million. And she told me that within 6 months of the separation, she lost 80% of her social circle. Women she had known for 15 years, women she had traveled with and confided in and considered her closest friends, gone. Not because they chose sides in the divorce, but because she was no longer useful. She was no longer connected to the power and the access and the invitations that had made her worth knowing. And she said to me, I always suspected that most of my friendships were not real, but I did not know for certain until I had nothing left to offer and watched them all walk away without looking back. That is a devastating realization, and it is one that wealthy wives carry with them constantly, even while the marriage is intact. The quiet knowledge that the people around them are not there for them, that their social world is a performance, that they are surrounded by people who would vanish the moment the circumstances changed. And that knowledge breeds a loneliness that is almost impossible to describe to someone who has not experienced it. Because you are never alone. You are always surrounded, and yet you are profoundly isolated because none of it is real, and you know it. Let me talk about the children now, because this is where the unhappiness of wealthy wives takes on a dimension that I find particularly heartbreaking. In most of the families I work with, the wife is the primary parent. The husband is building the business, running the empire, managing the investments. He is present, but he is not available. He is in the house, but he is not in the family. And so the wife becomes the sole emotional anchor for the children. She is the one who shows up. She is the one who handles the school calls and the bedtime routines and the emotional breakdowns and the teenage crises. She is doing all of the invisible labor of raising human beings, while her husband contributes financially and shows up for the highlight moments, the recitals, the graduations, the family photos. He is there for the performance of fatherhood, but she is there for the reality of it. And here is where it gets painful. She cannot complain about this. She cannot say, I am drowning in the demands of raising these children alone, because the world will say, you have nannies, you have housekeepers, you have tutors, you have every resource imaginable. How can you possibly be overwhelmed? And that response silences her. Because from the outside, it does look like she has unlimited support. But having staff is not the same as having a partner. Having a nanny handle bedtime does not fill the void of lying in bed next to a man who has not asked about the children's day in 3 weeks. Having a housekeeper manage the home does not address the fact that she is making every meaningful parenting decision alone and carrying the emotional weight of an entire family on her shoulders, while her husband treats the household like another division of his company, something that runs itself, something that only requires his attention when there is a problem. And when she does try to talk to him about it, when she does say, "I need more from you," or "the children need more from you," she gets the same response every time. "I am doing this for the family. Everything I do is for you and the kids. How can you say I am not present when I am working 16 hours a day to give you this life?" And she has no counter to that. Because he is right in a narrow technical sense. He is providing. He is building. He is securing their future financially. But he is missing their present entirely. And she is the one who sits in that present every day, watching her children grow up with a father who is more of a concept than a person. A provider they respect but do not know. A name on the accounts but not a voice in their memories. I need to address something else now. Something that people rarely talk about when they discuss wealthy marriages. And that is the physical and emotional absence that becomes the defining feature of the relationship. I am not talking about infidelity, although that happens often enough. I am talking about something quieter, more insidious. The slow disappearance of intimacy in all its forms. When a man is consumed by building and maintaining wealth, his capacity for emotional presence shrinks. He comes home and he is depleted. He has given his best energy, his sharpest thinking, his most engaged self to his work. And what is left for his wife is the residue, the leftover version. The version that wants to eat in silence and check emails and go to sleep and wake up and do it all over again. She does not get the man the world sees. She does not get the charismatic leader, the sharp negotiator, the visionary that his colleagues and partners admire. She gets the version that has nothing left to give. And she is expected to be grateful for that version, because at least he comes home. At least he is not out there doing something worse. At least the money keeps coming. I had a wife tell me once that she could not remember the last time her husband touched her in a way that was not functional. Not a pat on the back as he walked past. Not a quick kiss on the forehead before he left for a meeting. She meant a real touch. A hand on her face. An arm around her waist for no reason. The kind of physical affection that says, "I see you, and I want you, and you matter to me beyond what you do in this household." She said, "I am 44 years old and I feel invisible in my own marriage. I get more eye contact from the barista at the coffee shop than I do from the man I have been married to for 19 years. That is not a complaint about luxury. That is a woman describing the death of a marriage in slow motion. And it is happening in mansions and penthouses and estates all over the world right now. Women who are dressed beautifully and housed magnificently and provided for generously, and who are starving for the most basic human need there is. The need to be wanted. Not needed, not maintained, not accommodated. Wanted, desired. Seen as a woman and not just a wife. And that need is not met by a new handbag or a vacation home or an anniversary dinner at a restaurant where the bill is $4,000. That need is met by a man who puts down his phone and looks at his wife and says, "Tell me about your day," and actually listens to the answer. I want to talk about one more thing, and it is perhaps the most painful aspect of all of this. It is the guilt. The suffocating, relentless guilt that wealthy wives carry every single day. Because they know how their life looks from the outside. They know that most people would consider their problems absurd. They know that complaining about loneliness inside a mansion sounds tone-deaf. They know that saying, "My husband does not pay attention to me while wearing diamonds," sounds ridiculous to a woman who is working 2 jobs to keep the lights on. And so they feel guilty for their own unhappiness. They feel guilty for wanting more when they already have so much. They feel guilty for crying in a bathroom that is bigger than some people's apartments. And that guilt becomes a prison of its own. Because it tells them that their feelings are not valid, that their pain does not count, that they should be grateful and quiet and content because anything else makes them ungrateful. And so they perform happiness. They post the photos, they smile at the events, they tell their friends everything is wonderful. and they go home and sit alone in a beautiful room and wonder what is wrong with them. Why they cannot just be happy with what they have. Why they feel so empty when their life is so full. I will tell you what is wrong with them. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. What is wrong is the situation. What is wrong is a marriage structure that trades equality for comfort and then expects the person who gave up their equality to be grateful for the comfort. What is wrong is a culture that tells women they should want wealth and luxury above all else, and then shames them when that wealth and luxury does not make them happy. What is wrong is a world that looks at a woman in a beautiful dress, standing next to a powerful man, and assumes she has it all, when in reality she has everything except the thing she actually needs, which is a partner who treats her like a person rather than a possession. I have been doing this work for a very long time, and the thing that haunts me most is not the dramatic cases. It is not the affairs or the divorces or the public scandals. It is the quiet ones. The women who sit in my office and speak in calm, measured tones about lives that are slowly suffocating them. The ones who have never raised their voice or made a scene or done anything that would crack the surface of their perfect life. The ones who have been performing contentment for so long that they have forgotten what genuine happiness even feels like. Those are the ones who stay with me, because their suffering is invisible. It lives behind gates and walls and smiles and social media posts that get hundreds of compliments. And no one knows. No one even thinks to ask. Because how could someone with that much possibly be in pain? But they are. I promise you they are. And until we start taking that pain seriously, until we stop dismissing the unhappiness of wealthy women as a luxury problem, until we recognize that emotional starvation does not care about your net worth, and that loneliness inside a marriage is loneliness regardless of the size of the house. Until we do all of that, these women will continue to suffer in silence, smiling on the outside, breaking on the inside, surrounded by everything the world says they should want, and missing the only thing they ever actually needed, which was simply to be loved, not provided for, not maintained, not displayed, loved. The way every human being deserves to be loved, without condition, without transaction, without the quiet understanding that everything in their life is borrowed from someone who could take it all away the moment they stop being easy to live with.